There's a couple spots that I want to target this week. And I have not, full disclosure, I have not built it. Have you built any lineups in this yet? This is virgin territory for me.
Same here. So the only thing that I've done so far is just look at the first version of our projections and kind of get a sense for, most importantly, where players are priced, because that's always important going into week 2. Is you never know how the prices are going to move. I was also really interested to see what Jordan Mason's price was going to be for this slate. So I looked at our ownership projections, player projections, but haven't built out any actual lineups yet.
All right. So this is so gross because 2 of the teams I actually have interest in are just grading out terribly, which is the Giants and Washington. And Washington, from a stack perspective, for me would be a single stack, skinny stack. The problem I have with something like that is that every time Jaden Daniels sensed pressure last week, he took off or dumped it off to a running back. That is a concern. So I'm honestly considering running naked Jaden Daniels in lineups this week. We can get there. My guess is they don't sim out all that well. There's a few teams that I'm just pretty uninterested in when it comes to stacking. Cleveland, Deshaun Watson just stinks right now, with or without a fully healthy offensive line. Denver against Pittsburgh. A couple of others. Vegas isn't a good stack spot. Carolina, awful. Pittsburgh, Justin Fields expected to start. I could kind of go down the list. The Tennessee Titans against the Jets being another one. New England Patriots. New Orleans, even though Derek Carr had a fantastic game last time out. So even though it's a 13-game slate, Greg, there are, I think, a lot of teams that, unless you're just trying to get insanely contrarian, we don't really need to talk a ton about from a, double stack, even skinny stack perspective.
Yep, I agree with that. The one player you had mentioned that you're not interested in stacking is Justin Fields, which I agree. I don't have an issue with playing some naked Justin Fields lineups, at least on DraftKings. FanDuel, a little bit different where he's relatively more expensive, but I played some naked Justin Fields lineups last week. Wouldn't have an issue doing it this week either. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with you. We have a lot of just shitty looking teams like the Patriots, Broncos, Panthers that you had mentioned that I'm not going to be looking to stack.
I would have had some interest if in Fields skinny stack if George Pickens wasn't going up against Patrick Surtain. I mean, if you're Vance Joseph, how do you not just say, all right, they have one quality receiver, let Patrick Surtain work on him? You know what I mean? Metcalf had 3 for 29 last week out, just another tough spot. Of course, they didn't throw a lot, but it's just a brutal matchup each time he's faced Surtain. Back in 2022 as well, he only had 39 yards. Wouldn't you just think that Pickens is going to see a ton of Patrick Surtain in that game?
And then also, I'm going off memory here, so I have to look it up. I could be wrong. Pickens played less snaps than anticipated. Like, you would have just thought he was going to be out on the field the entire game. If I remember correctly, that was not the case.
He played 68% of snaps. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's the Arthur Smith factor now that he's over there now, but it was not, I would have just expected Pickens to constantly be on the field, and it has to hurt his fantasy upside if that's not going to be the case.
So let's see this much though. He ran 22 routes, led the team in targets by a wide margin. How many dropbacks did Fields have? This matters more than snaps. Fields had 29 dropbacks. So yeah, he was, I thought maybe he was out there for most of Fields, or he was most of them, but still, yeah, a little bit more limited. Thank you, Arthur Smith. I still think we're going to get amazing value out of Pickens at times this year. Ran a route on 81% of dropbacks, which looks better than 68% of snaps. But yeah, that is worth pointing out that this guy should have just been on the field the whole game, basically. So anyway, a couple of I want to build one with Washington and with New York at some point, maybe a game stack with a run back, and just see if it looks okay or if it looks terribly. But the ones in our top stack tool right now that are kind of popping are Baltimore, Rams. I think Stafford, Kupp, and Parkinson might actually be popular this week. So here's what I want to start with, okay? And then I want you to get a build in mind for when we build this next lineup. All right. I want to start with a Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams build with no Matthew Stafford.
So both Cup and Williams in the same lineup, you're meaning?
Correct. So last week, Cooper Kupp played 100% of snaps. He was targeted over 20 times. Kyron Williams played 91% of snaps and had almost every single running back touch there was. These guys can coexist in a game script like this. Matthew Stafford can not get there, but both of these guys do. So that's why I want to see how this looks. What do you think?
Right away, first thing I think when you say that to me is we do have the Cardinals rating out pretty well in our top stacks tool. I think it makes a lot of sense if you're going to have a lineup that is Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams to have Kyler Murray in it on the other side, and you're getting correlation that way.
Perfectly fine with it. I'd also be okay with James Conner in this lineup, not with Murray though. Not with Murray. But all right, so if you want to go Kyler here, let's try it. Where does the first
Kyler looked pretty good. I thought he looked pretty good when he was when they were showing him on Red Zone last week. He looked really mobile. He looked healthy.
He did a great job staying alive in the pocket, keeping plays alive. He's very good at that for being, a diminutive fella. But he also made a couple bad throws, missed wide open Marvin Harrison on a play that or on a drive that ended up stalling out and resulted in a turnover on downs. But let's try it. So we have Murray, Williams, Kupp. I don't really want here's the issue I have. I don't want to pay for Marvin Harrison right now. I mean, do you want to pay for Marvin Harrison here?
There's a lot of wide receivers I like on this slate. He wasn't crazy involved week one in the $6,900 price tag. I was hoping he'd be a little bit cheaper and then he'd be a good bounce back, but he's kind of priced as if he was like a wide receiver one and had a big game the first week. And we've got all these other wideouts that look good to pay up for. I'm more inclined to go to Trey McBride in lineups that have Kyler Murray in them. I know McBride didn't have a great game in week one, but basically every single tight end on the slate sucked. There was last week 4 total tight ends on the main slate that scored double-digit fantasy points, and only one of them, Kyle Pitts, was more than 3% owned. And then one of them, Juwan Johnson, was like 0.2% owned, if I remember correctly. So whoever you roster at tight end, they kind of sucked last week. And I think that's going to have people really hesitant to pay up for tight ends in a lot of lineups. I think that Trey McBride, especially because like you said, I think Parkinson's going to be pretty popular tight end. Jordan Akins is certainly going to be popular as well, with David Njoku expected to miss. So I think that it's not a bad slate to get a little bit contrarian by paying up at tight end.
I'm with you here. And Trey McBride is, in my opinion, an elite pass catching tight end. You saw 85% of snaps. Elijah Higgins was out there for 41% of snaps, but he was blocking because McBride ran a route on 90% of snaps, Greg. For a tight end, that's fantastic. You can't ask for more than that. Led the team in targets as well. That was a tough matchup too against the Bills. Sure, Milano was out and, he should have been better. He only had 30 yards on 5 receptions, but 9 targets led the team. I think McBride's just going to be involved week in and week out. So let's try it. That gives us, all right, 4,600 per player remaining. I have been punting a lot of tight end this week. Kobe, or just looking at it when I was building lineups without the simulator yesterday, seeing what worked. Guys like Kobe Parkinson, I had. Kate Otten was in there. Luke Schoonmaker was another one. So I actually haven't built any lineups with a expensive tight end. Let's just throw a cheap defense in there.
Okay.
There's a few down here that I have no problem with at all. Like if you just want to go Broncos against Pittsburgh, to me at 2,900, that is the clear spot.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking through some of the defense pricing and which ones might stand out. I was hoping the Colts maybe wouldn't be all that expensive against the Packers, but they're $3,300. Let's see.
By the way, I actually price agnostic. I actually like the Broncos defense better than the Colts.
Okay.
I think LaFleur is going to figure some things out, run some real trickery there. And you've got the guys to do it, like Jaden Reed. They have a lot of guys that I wouldn't be surprised if Malik Willis stinks, but they still managed to move the ball a little bit.
Looking through the defenses. Is there any, also just kind of curious, nothing is popular defense, by the way. It's really flat, which also makes sense. It's defense. It's the least important position. Random shit's going to happen. Somebody's going to fumble a punt and it's going to get returned for a touchdown. That'll be your optimal defense or something. So yeah, let's ride with this.
All right. And by the way, I assume Don't Move to Texas is talking about Marvin Harrison. He said, I think they try and feed him this week. He was way too uninvolved last week. I totally agree, by the way, that they will. The problem, and Greg mentioned this before I did, the problem is that even if that's the case, you have you have Malik Nabers, who got fed already in week 1 against the worst secondary probably in the league at 5,900. Chris Godwin against Detroit is 6K. Zay Flowers is 6,300. Ayuk is cheaper, projects for a lot more. Pittman projects for a lot more, who's cheaper. Rashee Rice at the same price of like him and Debo, both of them project for a lot more. And then right above him, you've got Garrett Wilson, who projects for a lot more. So if you're going to Marvin Harrison, I don't think you're going to get to Marvin Harrison Jr. unless you give him a heavy boost in ROI or in projection.
Yeah, he is somebody who, I mean, just out of curiosity, when we started here, I ran the Sims just to see like what exposure got me to players. Out of my top 150 lineups on DraftKings, Harrison was in one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough when you just look at all of those. The mid-range of receiver and running back is stacked this week. So now we have 5,000 per player remaining. Doesn't give us a ton here. Do we go running back next or try and find a cheap receiver?
Just because it's easy to plug in, it's going to be hard for me to get away from Jordan Mason this week. He's going to be the chalk of the slate when the dust settles. I feel pretty good about that, unless there's like a miracle recovery from Christian McCaffrey. We have him currently projected for 26% ownership, but once McCaffrey is officially ruled out, I think that number ends up going up a little bit. But you see how involved Jordan Mason was. There was no, like, they had Debo Samuel taking some of the backfield snaps and he got some carries, but Jordan Mason was the guy in the backfield. He's priced up like a little bit, I guess, because he's $5,200. So it's not like he's the flatman, but he's pretty clearly, to me, the best overall points per dollar play on the slate.
He is. It's right now, it's not really even in question. He's the guy. And for what it's worth, down there in that range, or in the 6K range, sorry, I think there are a lot of good options. Kyron Williams, great option. I like Isaiah Pacheco this week quite a bit too, and he's pulling only 6% ownership right now. I may have to manually boost his projection. He played a lot last week, and now he's got a matchup against a super suspect Cincinnati defense. Then you go even a little bit cheaper. James Conner in this same game we're stacking actually looks good. The Rams couldn't stop anything on the ground last week, Greg.
Yeah, if we look at, so I do think at this point we have to be a little bit cost conscious building out the rest of the lineup.
I'm not talking about this lineup. I'm saying in general, like if we go and build forward, I don't want to flex out a 6K running back in this lineup.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, there was a bunch of teams that really struggled more than expected defending the run. One of them was the Jets. I mean, the Jets got destroyed by Jordan Mason. I know we just talked about Jordan Mason and wanting to plug him into a lot of lineups in the matchup against the Vikings. But I mean, the Jets defense looked terrible, and I wasn't sure what to make of the offense. I'm still going to kind of give them a pass for week 1 because Rodgers, obviously the long layoff, coming back from the Achilles injury. We can talk more about the Jets offense in a little bit. I have pretty big concerns about what the downside of the Jets offense is, but even the defense didn't look all that great. So just another team in the bucket of run defense that didn't look good last week.
At all. That might have been the most surprising thing for me on the week, honestly. I also think Kyle Shanahan played some 4D chess, and they obviously knew that McCaffrey was going to be out long in advance, like clearly game planning for no McCaffrey, or for them not to have him. I want to try I'm going to go back to the well with Malik Nabers here, and I'm going to tell you why. Number one, Daniel Jones fucking sucks. Okay. He stinks. stinks. And I'm sure he's a great person. I'm sure I'm also just salty from last week, but it was bad, even with a clean pocket. Here's the thing, though. Malik Nabers is just going to be out on the field the entire game, Greg. I mean, when I say the entire game, I'm not being hyperbolic. He played 100% of snaps in his first game as a pro. He played 100% of snaps. Also, Daniel Jones dropped back 50 times. Do you know how many routes Malik Nabers ran?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I bet it was a lot.
50. He ran a route on 100% of dropbacks. He played 100% of snaps. And the Washington Commanders just got gutted by Baker Mayfield. I said it to you last week that I don't know if Dan Quinn and Joe Witt can fix this in an entire season, let alone an off season. And you got rid of Kendall Fuller. Call me stupid all you want. You know what? I'll eat my words in the event that once again, the Giants get no offensive production. But Greg, at sub 6K for a guy that's probably going to end up, if he gets a decent quarterback, being an elite talent, an elite producer, I just don't know how I get away from that this week against such a bad secondary.
He's pretty clearly my favorite wide receiver in the 5K range. Honestly, the one that's probably closest to me to Malik Nabers as of right now is Terry McLaurin. You could play them in lineups together. You get a little bit of positive correlation. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Nabers is super talented. And also, $5,900. Here's the difference between him and somebody like Marvin Harrison, where Harrison was not as involved as Nabers in week one. And I do think there's going to be a lot of variance to Nabers here just because the quarterback play is going to be so bad. But he's $5,900. He's priced for it, whereas Marvin Harrison isn't. So at $5,900, I do think the Nabers is the best overall wide receiver in that 5K range. McLaurin's the one I like the second most. Also, do you see the interview with Nabers where he was asked about them not throwing the ball to him downfield?
What did he say?
He said, I just do my job. I run my routes. Paraphrasing here. Try to beat my defender. He said, whatever happens in the backfield, he goes, I have no clue what's going on back there.
Damn. I saw that part. I didn't. So I saw the quote of him saying, I have no idea what goes on back there. I didn't know the context of the question was why they weren't throwing to him downfield.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. He's like, I just run my route. Whatever happens behind me happens behind me.
You know who I think we have projected a little bit too low this week? He's a receiver who had a great game last week. There's your hint. We didn't know if he was going to or not because he never really has before. Great pedigree though, drafted in the first round.
I'm not sure.
Jameson Williams.
Okay. He looked great in the primetime game, which obviously wasn't on the DraftKings slate, was on the FanDuel slate last week. And yeah, he looked really explosive, which has always been the case with him. It's just he hasn't been able to stay on the field for a variety of issues. Injuries, the betting scandal. So a lot of it's his struggles have not had to do with him not being able to play football.
No, and all the concerns, like, God, how many times do you hear people are worried about a guy dropping passes in practice in the preseason, and then it doesn't mean dick? Like, that was the Jamar Chase thing, right? Remember? And then he just came and lit the world on fire as a rookie. Same thing with Jameson Williams. You said it. He looked really good. I mean, he looked really, really good. And obviously, I don't think any of us assume that Amon-Ra St. Brown just isn't going to be used. Of course not. Like, he is. But they didn't have a wide receiver 2 last year. Who was it? Khalif Raymond, and was Josh Reynolds still there? Like, those guys aren't reliable. Jameson Williams looked so good last week against the Rams that I'm willing to say I think this guy is going to play a big role week in and week out in this offense.
Yeah,
after one game. The
concern is going to be, will he stay healthy? Which we also saw. He had that injury scare last week where he's looking really good to start the game, takes a hit, has to come out. It's like, oh, here's the same Jameson Williams stuff again. But then he came back in and obviously closed really strong. He absolutely broke the showdown slate last week. So I don't disagree with you. He's somebody who I think is you have to consider him a boom bust target just because we've only seen that from him really one game now. But yeah, I do think that there's reason to think that he could be a stud, especially for fantasy for the Lions this year.
You know why I don't think he's going to be as boom bust? Well, I mean, he boom bust in the sense of the offense has Montgomery, Gibbs, Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's just like, you could say the same thing about the Chiefs, right? But you're never going to, and a few other teams. But the reason I don't think is he got separation, he got open, he had explosiveness after the catch. You're kind of crazy not to use a guy like that every week. It's just who's going to get fed the most is the question. But, you know, he ran only 2 fewer routes than St. Brown last week. I think this is, all right, here's my bold prediction of the season. I think by the time the year is out, this is a 1 and 1A or 1A and 1B wide receiver room between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams.
Certainly could be. And by the way, when you mentioned that he ran 2 less routes, if I'm not mistaken, that's only because he had to leave for a couple plays due to that injury that he had.
Good call. Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, they would have played the same.
Good call. Also, I hit a plus 604 anytime touchdown parlay in our Discord over on the Odd Shopper Tales on Sunday. Jameson Williams, Cooper Kupp, Greg. We nailed that one to wrap up the Sunday slate, so that felt good.
Nice.
Yeah. Come join me too.
Nice.
50% off. NFL 24 promo code. Just go to oddshopper.com. You'll see it right there. You'll see Tails and Portfolio EV. One of them's a market-based. The other one is Tails, where you join a community with whoever you want. We have a ton of guys in there, a ton of insiders that you can select from. It's really sick. Jordan, click on Tails by Odd Shopper. You go there, you can discover all of the, so those are the picks, the free picks and the paid picks. And then you can discover everybody that's in there. And we just keep adding people. So if you love betting, you know, and you love having a community to surround you and sweat with and commiserate with when things go wrong, you love sweating long shots, any type of sport, all of these guys, head over there. And if you want to come hang with me, NFL 24, get you your first week, less than $5, first month for under 15. You've got something you're going to be doing too, sooner or later, that I'm kind of excited about from a DFS angle over in the marketplace.
Yeah, working on some stuff. Also, though, kind of not exactly related to this, but somewhat related. I'm going to be doing an office hours in our Discord channel later this afternoon. So if you guys are a Stokastic sub, 1 p.m. Eastern time today, I'm going to jump in there. And any questions you have for me about DFS, any particular slate, baseball, football, basketball, well, you know, not that we have like NBA price and start the year, but any DFS questions you have for me, or if you just want to talk about other stuff, I'm going to be hanging out in Discord and answering some of your guys' questions. So come hang out if you're in our Discord. You
definitely should. It'll help you go a long way. Obi-Wan said Jameson Williams breakout year. I think so.
Could be.
I'm not going to, belabor the point, but you watch that game. Those plays, the yards after the catch, the touchdown, they didn't look fluky.
No. And a lot of them, he had to make the offense for himself. Like there was an end around where he had the long run, and it looked pretty similar to the one that Xavier Worthy had in the first game of the year, where it's not like he was wide open downfield. He had to break a handful of tackles. He had to run past guys. He's clearly very explosive with big play upside.
Who do you want to go with as the next, who do you want to go with as our next wide receiver here? We have 45.50 remaining per player. So 9,100 total.
No, we have, because we plugged in Williams. We only have one spot left, right?
I didn't plug Williams in.
All right.
I wanted to, we're not projecting him well. We could always bump his projection, but I don't want to just arbitrarily do that yet without so I'd say we go look somewhere else.
Okay. So let's take him out then, Jordan. We might want to go a little bit cheaper here.
That's what I'm thinking, and that's why I didn't want to put Williams in. I think it only left us 3,400, which is not going to be easy.
It's going to be hard for me to not want to go back to Yoshevich this week.
Really?
He played every single snap last week.
I know.
The Bengals looked terrible, but he was constantly on the field, and he's still really cheap. And they're going to be in a game script. They have to throw the football again. Now, this is contingent on T. Higgins sitting again, but a guy who's $3,800, take the first week out of the equation because just everything looked terrible for the Bengals there. But he's $3,800. He played 100% of the snaps last week. It's in a pass-friendly game script. There's so many overreactions to week 1 of the season. I think the biggest overreaction, though, is just like the Bengals are cooked because they lost week 1. I don't agree with that at all.
I don't think they're cooked at all. But, okay, do you like him over Jalen McMillan?
Yes.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. There's
right.
And also, once again, this is contingent on T. Higgins being out. There are so many more players for Baker Mayfield to potentially be throwing the football to. The Bengals are so decimated with pass catchers, whereas the Buccaneers, I mean, they still have K. Dodd. They still have Mike Williams. They still have Chris Godwin. Rashad White is going to be catching a lot of passes out of the backfield. So there's a realistic scenario where McMillan ends up being like 5th on the team in targets. I just don't see that. Try to figure out where the targets go on Cincinnati.
I hear you. All right. McMillan led the team in snaps, which was surprising. But all right, let's go Yosivas. And that gives us, oh my God, it gives us Jameson Williams if we want to do it. That's exactly where we end up. Let's see. If we did it though, I want to bump the projection a little bit. 9 seems low. Like we're projecting Jameson Williams for the same fantasy points as McMillan. To me, that's just, I don't see it. Like I think Williams, especially in this spot, you know, with one of the highest totals on the slate, I think you get more out of him.
Yeah, I'm looking at the other players who are priced around here, and there's Chuba Hubbard, there's Mark Andrews. We could talk more about Mark Andrews in a little bit. I think this is a really good spot for a bounce back for him. It seems the public consensus is that Isaiah Likely is the tight end 1 for the Ravens, but Mark Andrews, I can't remember who it was that first had tweeted this out. Mark Andrews saw the most double teams last week than he'd ever seen in his entire career. He had basically no chance just because he was doubled on every single play. The Chiefs' game plan last week against the, who'd the Ravens play again?
The Chiefs.
Oh yeah, it was the Chiefs. My bad. Their game plan was just to stop Mark Andrews and let somebody else beat them. He was in a situation where he was in hindsight, he just wasn't going to have a big fantasy game with that kind of defensive game planning. I think he's a really good bounce back option this week against the Raiders, but I don't know that I want him in a double tight end lineup here.
I don't know if I do either. And honestly, the concern that I have is that if the Raiders have one really big strength, it's their pass rush. And that Ravens offensive line seems to be a serious problem. I don't know. It seems to be a big problem to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that their offense is going to be consistently good or anything like that. But I still do think that if you go forward the rest of the year, Mark Andrews, maybe this is considered a hot take at this point. I think Mark Andrews scores more fantasy points the rest of the season than Isaiah Likely does. You know who's priced around here?
I don't know if I agree with. What's that?
Ladd McConkey looked really good week 1.
I was just going to say Ladd McConkey. Yep. 4,900. We could throw Ladd in there. I have no issues with it. They're good. This team's going to run first, and Herbert didn't look back yet, but it's his first game and he missed a lot of training camp. We could try Ladd here. And
targeted 7 times. I know he didn't have any like massive big plays downfield, but he broke a couple or eluded a couple of tackles on that touchdown catch that he had, and still reasonably priced.
I want to upgrade to Jags defense, by the way, since we can, or Patriots, whichever you guys prefer. I'm sorry, Seahawks.
Yeah, whichever one projects better, just so it'll sim out better. I don't have like
throw the Seahawks in there, Jordan. And also, if you guys are running this, make sure that Cooper Kupp is in the flex instead of Cooper Kupp or Yosivas. Make sure that they're in the flex instead of Ladd McConkey. But we're just building this on the fly. So, yeah. Oh, my God. Look at that. First run, Greg.